What we're going to go through today, what we're going to go through today is a little about me. What was the UCAT? What makes it hard? How do I recommend preparing for it? And as well as like tips for each subtest. Okay, so I'm a third year medic. I'm at UCL. I applied to those universities. I got all four offers. And when I sat the UCAT, it was um, four subtests. So with abstract reasoning, I now realize that they don't have that anymore. So you can just divide that by four for my score. But what I did was once I finished all my mocks, that's basically when I started preparing for the UCAT. So right now it's May. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I sat it around August 1st or August 3rd. I'm pretty sure I have it written down here as well. But what I'd recommend is spend maybe 6 to 8-ish weeks for the UCAT and dedicate it fully for the UCAT. So one thing that you should probably do even before you get started on any UCAT preparation is get a good idea of what universities you actually want to go to. So make a list, like sit down, draft a list of maybe eight to 10-ish universities that you like the thought of. So a few ambitious, a few that are realistic, and a few safe options. And then for each of those universities, I recommend going on this website. It's called whatdotheyknow.com. And you can just go on there, just search up the university medicine A100, and then what it is every year people will kind of email universities being like, oh, can I get your admission data for this year, etc. And since they're all government institutions, they're kind of legally required to post that information for everyone to see. So you can have a look at whatever universities you want to go to. So for me, I looked at UCL and I'd search up like, oh, what was like the average A-level grades they got? Did they apply with A star AA? Did they have more A stars? What was like their ideal candidate that got given an interview? And then you can kind of see where you sit historically, um, based off what types of students that the university admits. So going through that website, you can kind of see like, okay, realistically, I struggle on verbal reasoning, so maybe I wouldn't want to apply to knots because I think knots places a lot of emphasis on verbal reasoning. But if you do really well on the UCAT, maybe apply to Southampton or Birmingham, where they can actually use the UCAT past the interview stage. So you can get an advantage that way, or if you don't do it too well, then apply to other universities that maybe put less emphasis on the UCAT. So even before you start preparing, have a good idea of like what universities you want to go to. What do they kind of want based off their official website? So what do they list on their official website, as well as historically, what does like the cohort look like? So who are the people, who are you competing with? Are you competing with people that have like an average of 800, 700, 600? Do they have band one, band two? So all of this information is really useful to you because it kind of removes some of the stress. You don't need to get like a top 1% score to get into medical school. As long as you kind of get a score that fits nicely to the four universities you're going to apply to, it's fine. But on the right, you can see the time per question for each of the subtests. So the difference between the UCAT and basically every other exam that you guys have come across, like your GCSEs or A-level mocks, is you're not genuinely expected to finish everything. They design it in a way that, so unlike your A-levels or GCSEs, where you're given like maybe 2 minutes per question, and in that 2 minutes, it's kind of reasonably expected of you to finish the entire question while you're working out and get the answer. You need to be a lot more tactical in the UCAT because realistically, you're not going to finish every subtest, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more about this later as well. So again, I've tutored the UCAT for maybe 3 years now, and generally each year these are like the main points that most of the people that I've tutored come and share to me. So the four kind of main things is one, verbal reasoning being at the start. So with VR at the start, you're going to get extremely tired. So by the time you get into decision making and QR, you'll be even more tired since you've spent maybe 22 minutes going through 10 whole passages, picking out keywords, answering complicated questions. So that puts a lot of mental fatigue on you. The next thing is what you'll kind of see maybe 5 weeks into your preparation is no matter how much more work you do, your score just plateaus. So you'll be stuck around 600, stuck around 500, 700, etc. Again, time pressure, we kind of talked about it earlier, and mental fatigue. So regardless of what subtest you're doing, so whether it's verbal reasoning, decision making, or QR, and these two main takeaways is what really helped my score. So the first thing is once you understand like realistically, if you want to get like 800, 850, 900 on a subtest, you don't need to get full marks. So you don't need to get 44 out of 44 on VR to get 850 or I mean 900. The way they mark it is they'll look at how everyone does and they'll gather their mean, their standard deviations, and they'll assign like, okay, so if you got 26, that means you're 600. And depending on how you place to that mean is what your score is going to be. So if you do really well relative to others, then you're going to get like 800, 850, etc. If you're close, like maybe within one standard deviation where you get like 29 or and the mean is 26, then you'll get maybe 650 or 700. So the main kind of takeaway is it's not like A levels where you need to hit 85 out of 100 to get an A star in chemistry or something. It's more like you are pitted against everyone else and you need to get more questions right than everyone else does. So for all intents and purposes, you should treat each question as being equal in marks. So let's say we're going to do verbal reasoning, right? So there's 44 questions and just treat all of them as the same. And like based off your preparation, certain questions you'll be really good at doing, and other ones you won't be that good at doing. So, for example, you'll be really good at doing maybe author's opinion questions, but you might struggle with, I don't know, like hypothetical questions. And if the text is based on science or medicine, maybe you're really good at those. But if it's philosophy or history, you've struggled more. So, based off your preparation, so all the mocks you've done, all the practice questions, you'll start building up this mental image of like being able to understand, okay, so this question, I've seen questions like it before. I tend to do really well on them, or I tend not to do really well on them. And just based off like your first instinct, try triage every question. So what I'd recommend, I'll go into more detail about this because it's quite useful, especially in verbal reasoning. But what I'd kind of recommend is as soon as you see a question, try decide in your head, is this something that you can do and you will save time? So going back to these timings. So if it's in VR, okay, let's talk about decision making. If it's in decision making, realistically, is it a question that you can get done in 40 to 50 seconds and you can make like a bank of 10 seconds? If it's like that, it's doable and you can get it done, then attempt it straight away, put an answer down, don't come back to check it. If it's something that you know you can do, but maybe it might take you 70 seconds or 60 seconds, then what I'd recommend you do is guess an answer down. So go with your gut in less than 5 seconds, flag it, and come back. So what I recommend everyone does is go through each subtest in three different passes. So in your first pass, all you're trying to do is maximize as many of these marks as you can. So all the doable questions that you can save time on and build a buffer of time. Once you've done all of these and you've secured those marks, you can now come back to the flagged questions that upon first thought you thought realistically I can do it, but maybe I shouldn't do it right now. I should build a bank of time. So go through those, double check, or even attempt the question again. And there will be certain questions, realistically, if you do it, it's either going to take you too long, and that time will be better spent on other questions where you can get more marks, or it's just simply too hard and it's a waste of time. So for those questions, what I do is just guess an answer. I wouldn't even like flag it because I kind of realize realistically it's just not worth me spending time reading it or checking it. So if you have a subtest, take it in different passes, go through it where when you first approach something, don't just go through it chronologically. First think to yourself, based off your past experience with verbal reasoning or decision making, do you tend to do well on these questions? Is it something you should do right away? Or is it something you should do but maybe later? Or is it something that maybe you should just skip? So understanding that basically every question is equal in value but unequal in time consumed is going to help you kind of separate yourself from the mean and get a higher score than other people and get like 800, 750, 850. So you don't need to get every single mark right. If you've invested a lot of time in a single question, it's okay to just skip it and spend that time elsewhere. I think that's one of the main reasons why people tend to kind of plateau their scores as well, because they will answer all of these questions and then they'll kind of misrecognize one of these two. And because they've already spent a minute or 2 minutes, they'll be like, okay, I should be able to get this in another 30 seconds or another 40 seconds. And it kind of turns into um, like a loss at that point. Okay, so triage those questions, do the ones that you can essentially. So after you've done this, after you've done a mock or a subtest, what you can do, what you should be doing is tracking your errors. So for those questions that you said, okay, this is doable, I can attempt it, or it is doable, it will take a little bit more time, but I will attempt it. If you get any of those wrong, what I want you guys to do is kind of maintain a Notion. So that's what worked for me. But you can use Excel, Word doc, even pen and paper, and try track like per subtest. Why is it that you dropped that mark? So, for example, something I do is if I genuinely attempted a verbal reasoning question, I spent my I spent like a good 40 seconds on it and got it wrong because I was kind of led astray by some of the words. Then I'd copy and paste that question into Notion and then write down, okay, so this is why I went wrong. This is why I went wrong. This is the word that kind of triggered me to go down this other path, or this is what kind of trapped me or tripped me up. And then the next time I see it, what I'd kind of write is like a key takeaway. So if I see something like this in this style, this is what I should kind of um, stop and check for. So any error that you've genuinely spent time on, not like the questions that you've guessed in the last minute and you get lucky or you don't get lucky. So the questions that you're doing in your first or second pass, go through those, track those errors, and then see are there any recurring logical flaws that you're making? Are there any traps that keep coming up that you keep falling to? And so you will be able to kind of understand your weaknesses really well. So earlier I mentioned I spent 6 weeks preparing for the UCAT. So it's not a strict 6 weeks. I'd recommend anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. The reason I'd say that is people that maybe booked their exam 3 months in advance, what kind of happened to them was they would kind of get complacent. So they'd realize, okay, I've still got a good 12 weeks. I don't need to do as much work today. And they'll kind of put off doing intense work every day. Um, I mean, it is good because you're under less stress, but at the same time, I think you need some baseline level of stress to kind of sit down and do the mocks every day. So I think 6 weeks is a good balance of you have enough time to kind of go through everything, do enough mocks, and be fully confident, but you're not like you don't have too much time where you can be complacent or too little where you're kind of risking um, not getting through all the content. So in the first 3 weeks, what I really struggled with was like the UCAT is quite time intensive and it's a 2 hour mock, and in every single minute of that 2 hours, you're basically like actively reading something, actively doing a calculation. So I found it really hard to kind of sit down and focus for 2 hours and make sure that 100% of my brain was occupied for all 2 hours. So what I kind of recommend to all my students is when you're first like getting used to the UCAT, maybe start by in your first week, maybe start by doing half a verbal reasoning subtest and then give it 3 days and then do a full verbal reasoning subtest. And then the next week, maybe try do a full VR subtest and then add in half a DM. And then by week two, I mean by the end of week two, you're able to kind of do verbal reasoning and then decision making back to back, and you still have like enough kind of mental capacity to do a little bit more. So try build yourself up to 2 hour mock. A lot of people kind of suggest doing a mock straight away to kind of establish your baseline and see what your score is right now. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's better if you kind of build up to a 2 hour mock, and then once you can focus properly for a 2 hour mock without like getting frustrated and skipping questions or blindly guessing, that's going to be a better reflection of your performance. But in your first 3 weeks, I think this is way more important than what happens in your last 3 weeks. This is the kind of phase where you don't necessarily know what the optimal route to each problem, the route to each solution is. So what I recommend all of my students to do is to start experimenting with what works for you. So for example, if you have logical puzzles, start making like different diagrams for different questions, see what allows you to get to the answer quickest. If you're dealing with syllogisms in decision making, maybe try the Venn diagram method for a week, and then try the arrow method for a different week, and then try not using your whiteboard at all and trying to do everything in your head for a week. And then the whole point of this is over the first 3 weeks, you need to start realizing what are you strong at, what are you weak at in terms of the questions themselves. So, are you good at maybe syllogisms but bad at logic puzzles? But as well as that, for each of those question styles, do you have like a distinct strategy that you can use per question? So, if you get an author's opinion question, do you have something that you know has worked for you in the past, and can you recognize its pros and cons? So, going back to the example of syllogisms, what I recommend is like there's multiple different strategies out there online. You can find guides, you can find YouTube videos, you can talk to people that have done the UCAT before, but realistically, you won't know what's going to work for you. So in that first few weeks, try experiment with all three. Write down like what worked for you, why it worked for you. So for example, if a syllogism question is really nice and easy and short, then maybe you're able to do all of it in your head. Whereas if it's a little bit longer and it involves more objects, then you might need an arrow diagram or a Venn diagram. So when you get to the exam, you're able to kind of see the question, recognize that it's a question that maybe deserves a whole like Venn diagram and a 20-second um, like break where you're drawing that diagram out, or it's something where you can skip that 20 seconds and just do it fully in your head. So the whole point of these 3 weeks is try all these different strategies. Even if like you find something that works within week one, don't just stick to it. Try different ones. And by the end of the 3 weeks, what you should be left with is for each question type within each subtest, you've got like a list of different strategies to tackle them. And then you're able to kind of recognize what the question's asking you to do and also identify the quickest route to the answer. So watch videos, read guides, talk to people who sat the exam. You can ask for tutoring with me. You can ask for tutoring with people that you know. Try find out what did they do for these questions, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and then see what works and see what doesn't work. So as an example, for verbal reasoning, this is kind of the methodology that I used. And what I recommend to my students is um, try this for maybe 2 to 3 days and then change the times. So maybe spend 5 seconds here or maybe 5 seconds here and change it so it fits you better. So, for example, earlier when I was talking about should I kind of triage these questions, which ones do I recognize? Um, which one should I kind of do straight away? This is like a diagram that I made to teach that kind of approach. So as soon as you see a passage, scan the passage, look at what topic it's about. So is it about science, philosophy, history? Look how long it is. Is it broken up into paragraphs? Are they short paragraphs? Are they long paragraphs? Is it scannable with proper nouns and numbers? So all of that information you can get within 2 seconds. And then what you should be trying to do is cross-reference what's ahead of you with how you've performed historically in the past. So have you done well on history-based questions? Have you done well on science-based questions? Should you attempt this or should you not attempt it? And then based off that, you can kind of go along with your approach. So in that first 3 weeks, try find as many different strategies as you can, experiment with what works and what doesn't work. And then by the end of it, ideally you'd be able to do a full 2 hour mock without losing concentration, as well as have like an entire variety of strategies for each question that you can recognize and apply. Okay, so once that is done, again, the 3 hours is kind of arbitrary. You don't need 3 weeks. You can do it in 2 weeks, you can do it in 4 weeks, but generally, this kind of phase is what helped me get to like the next phase. So with the last 3 weeks to my exam, so I remember my exam was at 1 p.m. because I realized realistically, I'm not going to wake up early every day. I'm not going to wake up at like 9 a.m. and do mocks. I'd rather maybe sleep in and then do my exam at 1 p.m. So I booked my exam for maybe August 1st or 3rd at 1 p.m. I can't remember the exact date. So what I did was for the last 3 weeks leading up to the exam, I think this is what kind of helped me see that I was actually improving each day. And what I did was every day maybe from like 11:30 to 1, I'd have the same morning. So I'd wake up, go eat breakfast, come back, sit down at 1 p.m., sit a full mock. So from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., I'd just sit the mock. I'd try and do it in my room and I'd try and mimic exam conditions. So I had like a cheap whiteboard with like a whiteboard pen. You use like a full-size keyboard and mouse. Don't do it on your laptop and don't do it on your like tablet. Use the online calculator that they give you within Medify or MedEntry. And then after that's done, just relax for the rest of the day. So from maybe 3 p.m. to 7, 8, 9, go hang out with your friends, go to the gym, do whatever you want to do. And then once you come back, reflect on your performance that day. What did you get right? What are your times per question? Do they look kind of even? Are you spending maybe 1 minute on one question and 20 seconds on the rest? How do you kind of so in your next mock, how are you going to improve that? What strategies worked this time? Why didn't they work, or why did they work? And then maybe do 20 to 30 minutes of targeted preparation. So maybe if I did a mock today and I came back at 9 p.m. and I found that I was really struggling on, I don't know, true false can't tell. I do 20 minutes of true false can't tell. And then based off like that and my mock, I'd write a few key takeaways for tomorrow's mock. So in terms of these errors, why did I get those questions wrong? What should I take away for my next time? I can show you guys what I had on Notion for the errors and stuff, and you can kind of track your progress every day. So make an Excel sheet or Notion sheet, write down your scores, see how they change. But yeah, so the two main phases is one, experiment, try figure out as many strategies as you can, and then after that, try implement those strategies over 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. Try do a mock a day. You can do two mocks a day. You can do a mock every other day. But what worked for me was doing a mock every single day at 1 p.m. and then maybe I take a break, maybe like Sunday or the odd Wednesday or here and there. But yeah, do you guys have any questions so far? Okay. Um, Let me get the other PowerPoint out. So for the rest of this lesson, I think I'm going to be tutoring you guys on July 26th as well. So we can get started with some of the content. So whatever I don't finish today, I'll kind of carry on from July 26th. But we'll start with verbal reasoning. If you guys have any questions, you can just put it in the chat. But yeah, you get your score straight off the test. It's in the same place you do your driving theory. So you just go there, you'll go with your ID and your booking information. They'll sit you down, you finish it after 2 hours, and you'll just get the score straight away. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay, again. So let's starting with verbal reasoning. I think that this is probably the worst performed subtest in all of the entire UCAT. And the main kind of takeaway is don't be worried if you're not good at verbal reasoning. Like I wasn't that good at verbal reasoning. You don't need to be amazing at VR to get a really good score. You can kind of compensate for an average or a below average VR by doing really well on decision making, QR. And when I did it, I had abstract reasoning as well. But now that that's gone, maybe there's a little bit more emphasis on VR. But again, historically VR is quite underperformed, so you don't need to kind of stress yourself out too much with VR. Instead, I would focus more on decision making and QR, making sure that you're getting 800 plus on those two consistently, so that when you do get to the exam, even if you don't do well on verbal reasoning, if you have a bad day, you know you're going to do well on DM and QR and you'll make up for it. But generally, what I found was on average, seven-ish of the passages were reading comprehension, and the others are true false can't tell. And within reading comprehension as well, I split it up into two different types, and I'll kind of explain what worked for me and why I did that split. So I mentioned this earlier. So and with each subtest, I kind of had a really methodical approach. So my first run through, what I do is skip as frequently as I needed to, answer around six passages. So these would be the six easiest ones. So if I saw a passage that I really liked, so maybe if it was on science or something like not history based or not philosophy based, then that would be a passage that historically I know that I've done well on. So it would kind of be a positive for me, as well as looking at the question type. So if I saw certain specific question styles, like, I don't know, hypothetical questions or author's opinion, or I can't really remember more, but like math-based questions, aim tone summary, etc. If I saw those and based off my past mocks, I perform well on those, then those are the questions I do in my first run through. So ideally, I'd answer six passages, spend around 11 minutes. So on the timer in the top right, you'd see like what I'd kind of recommend is building like a mental clock. So in your first run through, I'd try and spend 11 minutes. So as soon as I saw the 10-minute mark, I'd skip and start my second run through. And then let's say, so this is what finally worked for me. If you want to take this and try this for yourself, I'd recommend you do this for maybe 3 days and then change the numbers here. So maybe do 13 minutes here and take away 2 minutes from here, or add 2 minutes here, etc. Um, but yeah. Yeah, second one through, attempt to answer three more passages in 9-ish minutes. So these will be a little bit harder. You've already seen them once before and you've kind of recognized these are a tiny bit harder. They all require a little bit more time. Maybe they're history based or philosophy based. You don't like the passage, or the question style is really hard and you haven't performed that well on them, but they're still like easy enough that you should try them. I'd recommend maybe spending a little bit more time on them. Try not to skip too much of these. And ideally, what this kind of leaves you with is six really well answered passages, three moderately well answered passages. So you're only attempting nine out of the 11 full passages there are. So in that last minute, make educated guesses. And ideally, what you're doing here is because you've kind of gone through and triaged the entire VR subtest, you've done the easiest questions here, you've done the harder questions here, but they're still like moderately achievable. In that last minute, what you're kind of banking on is those last eight questions should be like the hardest on the exam. That if you were to do them in your first or second run through, then you'd spend a disproportionate amount of time on it so that you wouldn't be able to kind of answer other questions either way. So even though you are guessing in that last third run through, because you're guessing the really hard questions that either other people guessed and got right and they got lucky, which will be the minority, or the majority answered those questions and spent maybe 3 minutes or 4 minutes instead of the allocated 2 minutes. So you're either beating them on time or beating them on marks since you're kind of answering more questions. So again, this is kind of the idea that all questions should be treated the same in terms of marks, but they're not going to be equal in terms of time. So, um, in terms of question types, what I broke them down in is into true, false, can't tell, and within reading comprehension, type 1 and type 2. And what I mean by that is simply the approach I took was I didn't kind of read the entire passage because what I found was if I started by reading the entire passage each time, my concentration would drop within maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and I wouldn't actually take that much away. So what I start by doing is reading the question. So here, for example, I'd read the question, pick out keywords, 1662, half tax, preferable to poll tax, and what the main thing is for these questions, you need to understand that there's kind of two different sets of questions. So for example, here, you can answer this question quite easily by picking out the keywords, the numbers, everything from the question stem itself. So playwrights, targets, 1690, 1730. So all you need to kind of do is just scan through this passage, try pick out where does it talk about playwrights or maybe attack target at 1690, 1730. And you can see there's 1690 here, 1730 here. And then he says main targets attacked by the playwrights to be who, and then you can see 1730 criticized the government and the royal family, so probably B. So, in terms of the steps I took to answer this question, it was look at the question stem, pick out keywords, and then go through this. So, these are what I like to call type 1 questions because all the information that you need is basically within here. So, they're quite similar to true false can't tell in the sense where you're going through one distinct question stem, picking out keywords, and you're able to answer the question based off that. But type 2 questions are a little bit harder because they will be something like this, where there are some keywords up here, but for you to answer the question, you're also going to need to read and understand A, B, C, and D. So you're going to have to pick out maybe keywords here, so rate of ice melting, or crisis greenhouse effect, or space shuttle, or like nothing. Indeed. So you're going to have to go through the passage multiple times in multiple passes to kind of eliminate or pick out A, B, C, D. So That's kind of the distinction between type 1 and type 2. So type 2, you're going to have to eliminate each option. You have to go through each of the answer options. There's no kind of statement within the question stem to help you out. Um, and type 1 questions, they have kind of information within the stem that you can kind of use to pick out where you need to be within the passage. So what I generally found was true, false, can't tell, and type 1 reading comprehension questions. They would be attempted in run one, I mean, pass one or pass two. And then realistically, the harder type 1 or some of the type 2s would be just left for the third run through where I just guess. And that's what allowed me to kind of um, get 8 to 9-ish passages done out of the 11. So thinking about it in terms of how many you're answering, there's 44 marks available to you if you're attempting 6 passages in your first run through. Let's say you do really well and you get 22 out of the 24 there. And then in your second run through, you're answering 3 more passages. So let's say you do okay, 9 out of the 12 there. So you're already on 31 marks. And if you guess all of them, then you're expected to get another 2 marks. So 33 out of 44, which is a really good VR score. And this is based on everything here going to plan. So again, try experiment with the times here. Maybe don't do 3 run-throughs, maybe do 2 run-throughs, or maybe do 4 run-throughs. But at the end of the 3 weeks, you should have a strategy that works for you that you can take into the exam, and you're able to kind of trust that you're able to get all the easy ones answered while making sure that you're not wasting like more than 5 or 10 seconds on the hard questions that are specifically kind of built to slow people down. Okay, any questions so far? Uh, Okay, I can't really see the questions either way, so I'll answer them at the end. Yeah, again, summary again. So try do the easiest questions first. Attempt 8 to 9, maybe spend 150 seconds per set, so 4. And what that would look like is because you're kind of, let's say, again, when you're going through verbal reasoning, I'd recommend treating each passage as like a set of 4 questions. So what that should look like is, let's say this is the first question, and there's 3 more questions after this that are all based off this passage. You should expect the first question to take you maybe 50 seconds or 60 seconds because it's your first time going through this entire passage, understanding what it's about, picking out the keywords. But once you get to question 4, you've done question 3, I mean 2 and 3, you should try and like speed up. And a really good tip that worked for me is when I'm kind of going through and picking out keywords. So if I'm picking out Ministry of Justice supports the use of restorative justice. So if I pick out the keywords restorative or something, as I'm going through it, what I try and do is in my head, I'd kind of create a mental note where it says, okay, so the first paragraph is about A, the second paragraph is about B, the third paragraph is about C. So when I get to the next question, that's based off this passage, and I notice that it's talking about something specific, then I'm able to kind of know that, okay, so if it's talking about this, I should start by looking at the third paragraph. And if I get lucky, I can find my keywords there and answer the question. So based off this, what you should kind of see is as you're kind of going through these questions, your first question, since you haven't kind of made a mental note on what each of the paragraphs are, will take you maybe 50 to 60 seconds, and then your next one will be 45, and then 40, and then 30. So it will average down to something like 35, 37 seconds. So even though the UCAT says like you need to answer every question in 30 seconds, it's not realistic for you to kind of see every single question uniformly answer that 30 seconds. It's better when you're kind of going through your mocks that you see like a good um, kind of curve where the first question takes you a little bit longer. The next one, you save a little bit of time. The third one, you save more time. And the fourth one, you make back time that you spent on the first question. But yeah, always read the question first, allows you to understand the context, actively search for words. The whole point is you're saving time and you're not wasting kind of mental effort trying to understand where everything is. And after you pick out your keywords, look for your keywords. If you can find it within the first paragraph, great, you can answer the question. If you can't, try summarize what that first paragraph is about so that when you get to the second, third, or fourth question, you're able to understand, okay, so the third question was talking about something that was found in the third paragraph or something like that. Okay. Mm, if you guys just want to have a read of this, I think there was a question. Okay, never mind. But again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to type them. But I'd say the most important thing here is don't waste your time checking your work. If you think you found the right answer, just move on. So, one thing that I saw a lot of my students do last year and the year before was if they like figured out, let's say in this case, the right answer is B and they're confident it is B, to kind of make sure that they get the mark, they start going through C and disproving C and D and disproving D because what you kind of start to think is you spent 90 seconds on this question, you're maybe 70% certain it is B, but because you've already spent 90 seconds, you want to spend another 30 or 15 seconds going through C and D, disproving them on the slight chance that it could be your C or D. But in terms of the UCAT, just go with your gut feeling. If you think B is right, then click B and then just hope that it's right because spending that 15 seconds on a different question will net you more marks in the long run. Okay. But yeah, don't waste time checking your work. If you think you found the right answer, you don't need to kind of systematically evaluate the rest of the answer options to check. If you get lucky, the right answer is A, you don't have to check the rest. If you get unlucky, you're going through A, B, C, and then you land on D, so you know that one is right. But yeah, okay. Uh, okay, another kind of key distinction, a lot of people struggle with this, is understanding when is it can't tell and when is it false. So what I really strongly recommend you guys do when you're going through true, false, can't tell is when you're going through this and you're trying to understand, okay, is it true, false, or can't tell? In my head, what I'd kind of imagine is the first time I'm trying to read this, I'm trying to pick out keywords, trying to figure out is it true or is it false or can't tell. So based off what I can see, the only thing I'd kind of figure out is it true or false. So I'd ignore the fact or the possibility that can't tell is even an answer option. So going through it, if I saw this for the first time, I try and go through it and I try and think to myself, so based off this text, can I tell is it directly true? So is it directly supported or is it directly contradicted? And then once I've kind of exhausted those two, that's when I'd start thinking about can't tell. Um, I wrote down a good strategy for this, but yeah, so start off by reading the given statement, finding the keywords. That's the same as everywhere. So after you find out where the keyword is within which paragraph of the text, if you can't necessarily determine is it true or false straight away, read the sentence before and after it, see if it's explicitly confirmed or contradicted, and then if you still can't, then maybe go through the rest of the passage and read for see if the keyword is found elsewhere in the passage. And then once you've done all of that, then that's when you should start thinking about, oh, is it maybe can't tell or is it false? Because what happened to me was I kind of struggled to determine is it can't tell or false. So what I did was just ignore can't tell, only kind of lean towards can't tell if I've kind of strongly concluded that it's not true or it's not false. And I try and make sure it fits into these three scopes. I mean these three cases. So does it go outside the scope of the extract, even partially? So what I mean by that is if there is a question, um, I don't know, like here, licenses are awarded after successful completion of diploma, advanced theory P1 and P2. So if everything before this is mentioned, like diploma, advanced theory P1, but P2 isn't mentioned, then in that case, it goes beyond the scope and it would be can't tell. There's a talk about new things that haven't been mentioned in the passage. Is there any uncertainty in the passage? So can't tell just means you don't have enough information to tell. Uh, it doesn't mean it's not explicitly stated. So sometimes they'll make you infer the given statement. So they'll have some information in the first paragraph and some information in the third part paragraph, and you'd have to kind of infer it is true based off stringing together the first and the third. So what I'd recommend is ignore can't tell, go through it, see if you can strongly support it or strongly contradict it based off the passage. If you can't do that, then that's when you should try and think about, okay, so maybe this could be can't tell. And that kind of helped me in terms of clarity. Okay, if you guys want to have a read of this as well. Okay, someone's asked me, are there specific sections targeted practice on Medify or where else can you find them? If you have Medify on entry, you can kind of do untimed or time practice on specifically style of question. So you can go in and only do logic puzzles and decision making or something like that. So they do have those in those apps. Um, and another person has asked me, should we start doing mocks now? So it depends. So in terms of when to book your exam and when you should start, I'd strongly recommend like doing all of this once you're fully done with all your A-level commitments. So don't try and do both at the same time. Like you should focus on getting your A stars and your A's on your A-level marks. Once that's done, then think about the UCAT. So then think like, okay, I'm gonna need 6 to 7 or 8 weeks to go through all of the UCAT content. So let me book my exam for maybe mid-August or something like that. So after you're done with your mocks, then you can get your Medify or MedEntry subscription. They both work and they both um, have basically the same level of functionality, so you're not missing out on either. But yeah. I've kind of talked about this stuff already. So making mental notes. So read the first line, read the last line, and you can figure out what that entire paragraph is about. And then when you get to those third and fourth questions within a set of four, you're able to kind of use your mental notes to get back to where the keywords should be to allow you to answer the question. So yeah. And again, type two, skip any of the hard ones. If it's on a passage that you like. So, for example, if you've done really well on science-based texts, then maybe you can attempt a type two. But again, the main piece of advice is these type two questions are extremely time-consuming. If you think you found the right answer, just click it and move on. There's no point reading the rest, and your time is way more valuable spent on other questions. Um, but yeah, do you guys want to have a go at this? You can just type in the meeting chat what you think the answer is for nine. Okay, a lot of you haven't answered. But okay, the answer is B, true. And you can see it says it here, all candidates are required to pass parts one and two of the practical examination. Um, but yeah, because the license is awarded after completing the required qualification route and PE, P2. Okay, but yeah, um, but generally, as you're doing questions, it's much better to do them under timed conditions, and it's far more useful to do full mocks than it is to do standalone questions or untimed questions. Because realistically, if you're given enough time, you should be able to answer every question on the UCAT and not get anything wrong. The main difficulty comes with trying to manage your time, identify the easy questions, get those questions right, while making sure you're not answering any of the hard ones, so you're not wasting any time on those. But yeah, um, and again, there's a lot of like specific advice for verbal reasoning in terms of like what to do when you see specific words. So, for example, if you're guessing, you don't have that much time. I found this thing where if you see something like, is there an example? Okay, there's not an example, but let's say, um, let's say in the passage it says cats are often seen at night. So often is not as like extreme as always. So often is called a soft qualifier and always is called an extreme qualifier. So if you're given a true false can't tell question and the passage says cats are often seen at night, whereas the question says, oh, is it true that cats are always seen at night? Because you've gone from a soft to an extreme qualifier, it's more likely that the statement is false. Whereas if you go from an extreme to a soft qualifier, so if the passage said cats are always seen at night, whereas the question says something like cats are often seen at night, because you've gone from always to often, you're leaving some room for doubt, and it's more likely that you can't tell what's true. Um, you can also use this logic to help you identify what approach to take for a question. So, for example, if you're doing a type 2 question and you notice that two of them, A and B, use extreme qualifiers, C and D use soft qualifiers, you know that using extreme qualifiers are really easy to disprove because all you need to do is find one instance where the rule doesn't fit. Whereas qualifiers are really easy to prove because as long as you find an instance where the rule works, then the statement holds. So maybe when you're going through A and B with those extreme qualifiers, you're looking in the passage to disprove those points. Whereas when you're going through C and D, you're looking for evidence to support that point. So again, you can talk to different people, you can find guides online. It will be on Medify and MedEntry, but there's a lot of specific content that you can kind of read and understand and apply um, based off each specific question. So, for example, um, author's opinion, what I found was looking at the last paragraph is generally where I got marks for author's opinion questions most of the time. So what I did was when I sat my exam, if I saw anything that said, okay, what is the author's general opinion, then I'd start with the bottom instead of the top and just go through the last paragraph first, see if I can answer it, etc. But in your first 3 weeks, try find as much information as you can, see as many tips as you can, different strategies, and then try employ them in your own mocks and your subtest mocks and see what works for you, see what you need to change, and see when you need to use it. But yeah, okay. Uh, and again, the main approach that I took was I didn't read any of the passages. So if I saw something, so say for example, I saw something like this, I wouldn't try and read and understand everything that's going on because I tried to answer as many of those true false can't tell and type 1 questions where you don't need to kind of synthesize paragraph 1 with paragraph 3 to kind of infer what the answer is. Um, Try and do the simpler questions and try and get like those easy marks done. So with everyone, they kind of have to uh, strike a balance between the speed at which you're reading and what's it called the speed at which you're reading and how much kind of content that you're getting away from the text. So if you're increasing your reading speed, you'll be able to kind of answer more of those questions and within the 21 minutes. But because you're kind of falling to more traps, you're maybe making more logical flaws, your overall accuracy is going to drop. Whereas if you're slowing down, you're understanding that there's traps involved and your logical accuracy is really good, you might be able to answer less questions. But since your accuracy is better, your kind of mark gets better. So for everyone, they're going to have a different reading speed, and everyone will kind of be able to find their optimum at a different speed. So maybe if you can read really fast and retain a lot of that information really well, you're able to kind of answer more questions while understanding that realistically you're not going to be as accurate. Whereas if you can't, then maybe slow down, be more accurate. So the reason I'm stressing this is the kind of minutes and the three run throughs that I mentioned earlier, that's what worked for me. So going through six passages in the first run through was what worked for me. So it might not necessarily work for you. And the main kind of takeaway is try it for a couple of days and then see how should you change it to fit your strengths and weaknesses. So if you can read faster, maybe do more in your first run through. If you read slower, maybe allocate more time in your second run through to spend more time on those harder questions. But yeah, um, I'll but again, I've kind of given, so this is kind of what I'd, so earlier in the other PowerPoint when I was talking about writing down common traps. So if you've kind of spent the good 40 to 50 seconds that you've allocated for a question and you still get it wrong, what you should kind of try and write down, whether it's a Notion or a Word document or like a notebook, is something like this. So for example, here, I think I was doing a question where had two different statements where one statement said, is it true that this person was a teacher? And then the other statement said, in charge of educating students. So I got this wrong, and what this is what I wrote down in my Notion. So identifying that there's two claims and there's two distinct claims, even though naturally, when you talk about something like this, you're going to assume that a teacher is in charge of teaching students. Um, you can't assume prior knowledge in VR. So anytime you see two claims being made about someone back to back, just be aware of it. So this is the kind of takeaway that I'd write after that day's mock and getting the question wrong. So the next day when I'm seeing something similar to this, or maybe 2 days after that, I'm seeing something similar to this, I don't make the same mistake again. But yeah, so the questions that you genuinely do get wrong. So for example, um, just because, for example, here, if Usain Bolt got 9.58, someone that got 9.6 isn't necessarily second. Um, you can't make that connection because you don't have enough information. Or if an author is quoting someone else, and I messed up that question. So these are the kind of things that I'd write in my Notion so that the next time I saw something like that, then I'd kind of slow down, understand that there might be a trap involved, and attempt it. But yeah, I think I'll go through decision making next time because we've only got 5 minutes. So for the last 5 minutes, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them. How many dates are available to sit the test, and is there a certain month that it is best to do it in? Um, I wouldn't recommend. Um, okay, so you can find like a testing center near you. You can book it for whenever you want. There is a window where it opens and closes. Like I don't know when it opens or closes specifically, but it's over summer. You can check them online. I can't answer that question, but in terms of the best month to do it in, again, try give yourself maybe 6 to 8 weeks um, of preparation after your mocks are done, so that you have enough time to go through everything while still having enough stress that you're going to go through everything and actually work hard. in terms of how long you should spend per question, um, so this is kind of what I was talking about the whole time. So you should try and experiment with that. So certain questions will take you longer, other questions will take you shorter. The whole the whole point is you need to be able to understand which questions will take you longer and essentially waste marks, whereas which questions will take you shorter, and those are the questions that you should be doing. When you say only look for keywords in the text, how are you sure? Yeah, so that is one of like the traps that they use. So one kind of technique that they use is called dispersion and contradiction. So again, the whole reason that certain questions are like this is because people do keyword search. So they're intentionally designed to throw off people that only keyword search. So finding the first instance and moving on. So again, there isn't like a good solution to this because if you do spend time reading every single question, understanding like each paragraph, then you simply won't have enough time to answer enough questions to get a good score. So even though there are certain questions where maybe in the first paragraph they'll support something and the third paragraphs they'll contradict themselves, realistically those questions are designed to intentionally throw off people that do only keyword search. So realistically, you've got two options here. If you get lucky and you kind of think in your head, maybe this question was too easy or too straightforward, maybe you can look for further instances later in the text. But realistically, I don't think you can kind of predict which question will kind of contradict itself later on. And I think in terms of what strategy you should be using, keyword searching is going to allow you to answer more questions than kind of reading the entire passage. Um, how do you practice essential skills needed for the UCAT? I don't understand that question, but um, the main thing I do is try build up to doing a full mock a day, and then with that, experiment different strategies. So look online, look at Student Room, look at Reddit, look at YouTube, see what people use for different question styles. Uh, for logic puzzles and decision making, you can look at BMAT because BMAT has a lot had a lot of overlap with some of the syllogisms and logic puzzles. Maybe do the harder questions on there so you can transfer some of the skills into the UCAT. For maybe QR, look at other different maybe harder questions, get really comfortable with tax brackets. In terms of mental maths, again, this is a really important point, but for QR, the main kind of regret that I had was when I started my UCAT preparation, I kind of thought if I got really comfortable and confident using the calculator, I'd be able to answer more and more questions and get a good score. But what I kind of realized is eventually you'll get to a point where you're limited by the speed at which you can type or use your calculator. And it's much better to kind of stop using the calculator fully and only stick to mental maths. So something I did maybe the last week or the last 2 weeks before my exam was I used to try and do what's it called QR questions and try do them without the calculator, try do them without any pen and paper. Like obviously I'm not trying to get a good score then. The whole point is to kind of challenge myself and train mental maths. Because when you get to the actual exam, the majority of questions that you should be doing should be based off mental maths. Um, yeah, so these are the answers for question 9, I think. So these questions were just given to me. Right. So 9 is A. I don't know if these answers are right, by the way. I haven't done the questions. Okay. I don't know if you guys have any more questions, but yeah.
Yeah, that's if there aren't any more questions, we'll go ahead and conclude today's session. Um, as normal, the recording will get sent out to yourselves. And we will be, let me just double check. Let me just double check. Yes, we have a session. We have a session next week on the 24th, and then that will be it until July. So we won't be conducting any sessions in the month of June. As of May, next week will be the last session, and then we will restart again in July, just to reiterate that. But I hope everyone has a lovely evening, and we'll see you all next week at 5 o'clock. Thanks, Pod, again, for doing today's session.